We continue now at the top of Daf 80b Daf in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 80b. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a Mishnah in Meseches Para. Rabbi Eliezer says, let's say you have mechatos that gets mixed with other water, so you can do 2 hazos, you do 2 sprinklings from that mixture of water, and then that will be sufficient in order to purify. And the Gemara brought various Amoroim on the previous summit to explain Rabbi Eliezer. Rav Ashi explains that according to Rabbi Eliezer, Ein Bila. Ein Bila means that it's not necessarily true that if you have some water from this mixture, that it's going to contain both the puzzle and the kosher water. That's what it means, Ein Bila. And again, according to Rav Ashi, that's going to be used to explain why you do 2 sprinklings. In any case, the Gemara continues and says, Viod, and further, Tanya Behedya. We learned in a Brisa explicitly, Hanitanin lemalo shenisarvu b'nitanin lamata. Let's say you have blood that's supposed to be applied to the upper part of the Mizbeach. It gets mixed with blood that's supposed to be applied to the lower part of the Mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer says, Yitain lamala. So you do the applications on the upper part of the Mizbeach. V'hatachtonim alulo. And then on the applications you do on the lower part of the Mizbeach, that will count. That will fulfill the obligation. Rashi explains Viod Tanya. Further, we learned in a Brisa to Yuvta Rav Ashi. This Viod Tanya is a refutation of Rav Ashi's approach to explaining Rabbi Eliezer. The Amar Taima de Boy Tarti, because Rav Ashi said on the previous Amud that the reason why you need 2 applications is Mishum De'ein Bilahu, because we don't necessarily say that there is a mixture, that the different waters are fully mixed, and so therefore if you do 1 application, again, maybe that application is going to be what is not the mechato, so you do another application. In any case, the question from the Brisa is, the Shaminan Rabbi Eliezer de Islay Bila. We see from Rabbi Eliezer in this Brisa that he does hold that there is a full mixing. Alma Shaminan Mehanach Tarti Masnaisa. And the point over here is we see from these 2 Brisas, the Gemara in the previous Amud also brought a Brisa, and that was a refutation of Reish Lakish's approach to Rabbi Eliezer. And so you see, if we're refuting Reish Lakish and we're also refuting Rav Ashi, then we're left with only the explanation of Rava. The time of Rabbi Eliezer Karava, that the real reason of Rabbi Eliezer follows Rava. Devechada Nami Miskasha. Rava said that really Rabbi Eliezer would hold even 1 sprinkling would be sufficient, and Alma Knasu, and the reason why you do 2 is just a fine that is imposed by the Rabbanon. That was Rava's explanation. In any case, the Brisa said Hanitanin Lamala. It said that you have a situation where blood is supposed to be applied in the upper part of the Mizbeach, gets mixed with blood that's supposed to be applied in the lower part of the Mizbeach. Kasalka Daitach, Rashi says, right now, initially we think, Dam Chatos b'Dam Ola. Let's say you have a mixture of Dam Chatos and Dam Ola. Dam Chatos is applied on the upper part of the Mizbeach, Dam Ola is applied on the lower part of the Mizbeach. So what you do is as follows. Yitain Lamalo Lahachshir Chatos. So first you do the applications on the upper part of the Mizbeach, and that's going to be for the chatos. The mitzvah lahaktim elyonim letachtonim. It's a mitzvah always to do the upper applications before the lower ones. Kedomar lekamon beperakol atadir, like we're going to say later on in perakol atadir. Veroa anias hatachtonim lamalo kilo hein mayim. And then whatever application is done in the upper part of the mizbech, again, that's a mixture of blood from the chatos and the ola. So whatever Ola applications are done, whatever Ola blood is applied incorrectly to the upper part of the Mizbeach, we just view that as if it's water. Rabbi Eliezer says we can say Roa'ani, we can say that we view it as water, and it's not a problem. According to the Rabbanan, you can't take that approach, so you have to pour it down the drain of the Azara. And then Rabbi Eliezer says, Vatachtonim Olula, which means, Kishayachzor v'yitein shirayim lamata, there's a halacha by the blood of the chatos that the remaining blood is poured to the base of the Mizbeach. So when that is done, so when you're pouring the Shirayim, Lamata, L'Shem Shirayim, for the purpose of pouring the remainder, Alulo, V'af, Lamata, and Damola, that also will count for the application of the blood of the Ola. In other words, you'll apply that blood to the lower part of the Mizbeach. That will count as the application of the Dam Ola, and it will also count as the Shirayim of the Chatos, because again, it is a mixture of both of the bloods. And so the Gemara now says, V'amrit ein bila. Now, if you're going to say that Rabbi Eliezer holds there is no mixing, again, that was Rav Ashi's approach to Rabbi Eliezer, that there's not necessarily a full mixing. So amai olulo. So why would it be true that it's going to fulfill the obligations again of the upper and the lower bloods? Why would this be effective? Dilma koyoev elyonim lamata vatachtonim lamala. Maybe he actually applied the upper bloods to the lower half and the lower bloods to the upper half. How do you know that there was really a full mixture over here, that the blood was applied properly properly. Rashi explains, V'im ein bila, if there's no mixing, so chatos amai also lo. So why is it that when he applies the blood to the upper half of the mizbeach, why is that effective? Dilma lo yohev lamalo ela tachtona. Maybe the only thing that he applied on the upper half of the mizbeach was the lower blood, and so therefore you see it must be that Rabbi Eliezer holds there is bila, there is actually a full mixing. So when he applies the blood to the upper part of the mizbeach, he's applying from both, and so therefore he does in fact fulfill the application of the blood of the chatos again to the upper part of the mizbeach. And the Gemara continues and answers, and we can explain this brisa as follows. Here, what are we dealing with? Kagon diika ruba elyonim. The case is that the majority of the blood, we know it's all mixed together, but we also know that the majority is actually chatos blood. It's upper half of the mizbeach blood. V'kayoev lemalo shir tachtonim. And then what he does is he applies to the upper half of the mizbeach the full measure of the lower blood, v'od, and then he applies a little bit extra, so he knows for sure he's applied the upper blood, the blood of the chatos, to the upper part of the mizbeach, because again, he's given the full shear of the tachtonim he's already applied, plus a little more than that, so certainly there is chatos blood in that mixture. But the problem with this approach is, hatachtonim alu lo katani, but doesn't it say that he also fulfills the lower blood? Now, how does he fulfill the lower blood if he applied the entire shear of the tachtonim? And if we are suggesting over here again that maybe ein bila, maybe it doesn't mix, so then it's possible he applied all the lower blood on the upper half of the mizbeach, so how did he fulfill the lower blood? And the Gemara says to that, l'shem shirayim, all it means is, when it says tachtonim alu lo, again, when it's katanim, when it says that the tachtonim he fulfilled, that does not mean that the ola blood was fulfilled. It's l'shem shirayim. It just means that the remaining blood of the chatos, which is supposed to be poured to the base of the mizbeach, that was fulfilled, and therefore it is possible to interpret this brisa that ein bila, that again there really is no mixing. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof. The Brisa says, Nasan lamata velo nimlach. Let's say he has this mixture of blood, again, chatos and ola blood, and he applies it to the lower half of the mizbeach without consulting, because had he consulted, again, we say the mitzvah is always to start with the upper half of the mizbeach, but again, he didn't ask, and he started with the lower half. So the Brisa says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Yachzor v'yiten lamalo, he should go and again apply now to the upper half. He should take from this blood and apply to the upper half of the mizbeach, v'hatachtonim alulo, and then he will fulfill his obligation with the lower half as well. And so again, the question is essentially the same. If we say ein bila, that it doesn't necessarily mix, so how do we know that what's being applied on the upper half actually is the chatos blood? How is it that he's fulfilling both the obligation of the upper blood and the lower blood? And the Gemara says, Hachanami, here also the same answer. Beruba elyonim, the case over here is that the majority of the blood in the mixture we know is the blood that's supposed to be applied to the upper half of the mizbeach. V'kayoev lamala shir tachtonim v'yod, and again, he's going to apply to the upper half of the mizbeach the full measure of the lower half, the full measure of that blood, plus a little bit more. So he knows 100% that he's applied chatos blood to the upper half of the mizbeach. Again, the Gemara asks, "V'tachtonim alu lo katani," but it says again the lower half he also has fulfilled. How is it possible that he has fulfilled the lower half? Maybe everything he applied to the upper half included all of the tachtonim. And again, the Gemara answers, "L'shem shirayim." It just means to say that the remainder, when he puts the remainder of the blood to the lower half, that's the remainder of the blood of the chatos, that he knows that he has fulfilled. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof. The Brisa says, Nisanan lamalo, let's say he applied the mixture of blood, again, the chatos blood and the ola blood, he applied it to the upper half of the mizbeach, velo nimlach, and he didn't consult, he didn't ask what he should do. So in this case, elu ve'elu modim, they both admit, meaning both the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer admit. Normally the Chachamim say in such a case of a mixture, it should be poured down the drain of the Azara, because the Chachamim don't allow him to apply it all, let's say, to the upper half, because you can't take lower half blood and apply it to the upper half. They don't agree that you can view it as water, so to speak. But in this case, where it was already applied to the upper half of the Mizbeach, so at this point they all agree, Sheyachzor v'yitein lamata, that he should go and he should apply to the lower half, ve'elu olulo, and both of them will be fulfilled, meaning both of the chatos blood and the ola blood, the applications will be fulfilled. And again, the question is, if Rabbi Eliezer is saying here that you're applying to the upper and to the lower, so how is that effective if Rabbi Eliezer holds ein bila? If Rabbi Eliezer holds that there's not necessarily actually a mixture. How do you know that the blood of the chatas was applied to the upper half and that the blood of the ola was applied to the lower half? And the Gemara again answers, hachinami, here also we can answer the same thing. Beruba elyonim, the majority of the blood in the mixture is upper blood, it's chatas blood. V'kayoyev lamala shir tachtonim v'yod, and the amount of blood that he applies on the upper half of the mizbeach is the full measure of the amount of the lower blood, the full amount of the ola blood plus a little more, so he knows 100% that some chatas blood was applied on the upper half of the mizbeach. But the Gemara asks, va'elu ve'elu alu lo katani, but again it says that both the upper and the lower, he's fulfilled the chatas blood applications and the ola blood applications, and so again in this situation, if we say ein bila, that there may not be a full mixing, so maybe all of the lower blood was applied to the upper half of the mizbeach, and on that the Gemara says, mikatani elu ve'elu modim. In the end of the brayse here, it doesn't say that everybody agrees that the lower blood was fulfilled. It says elu ve'elu alu lo katani. It says that both are fulfilled, but seifa asan l'rabbanan. But that last line is only following the rabbanan. The rabbanan da'amri yesh bila. The rabbanan, they say there is a full mixing. So according to the rabbanan, not only has the chatas been fulfilled, but the ola has been fulfilled as well, because the bloods are fully mixed together. So what he applied to the upper half of the mizbeach, there certainly was some chatas blood, and what he applied to the lower half of the mizbeach, there certainly was some ola blood, but that would not necessarily be true. Again, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says ein bila, if we assume that Rabbi Eliezer says ein bila, so the blood that was applied to the lower half of the mizbeach, it did not necessarily contain the ola blood. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from our Mishnah. Hanitanim b'matana achas, let's say you have blood that's supposed to be just one application to the Mizbeach. Shenisarvu b'nitanim b'matana achas, it gets mixed with another blood that also is one application to the Mizbeach. So then yinosnu b'matana achas, you just do that one application with that mixture of the blood, and that will fulfill the obligation. And this part of the Mishnah was following Rabbi Eliezer, and the Mishnah implies yesh bila, that there's a full mixing of the bloods, and that's why if you do one application, that is sufficient, because you know that you've applied both of the bloods. V'yamar ein bila, now if we say that there is no mixing, amayi nosnu b'matana achas, how could it be? Why is it that you're just doing one application? Dilma mehai kayov, maybe you are applying this blood, umehai lo kayov, but you're not applying anything from the other blood. And the Gemara continues and answers, kegon shenesarvu achas biachas. The case of the Mishnah actually is where the shear, the measurement of one application of blood, is mixed with the measurement also of one application of blood, and then you're just going to actually apply both measures to the Mizbeach, and therefore you certainly have applied again from each of them to the Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues, Matan Arba b'Matan Arba. The Mishnah goes on to say, let's say you have blood that's supposed to be applied 4 applications to the Mizbeach, gets mixed with other blood that's supposed to be 4 applications. So it says over there, you do 4 applications. Again, the implication is that they're all mixed together, and therefore if you do 4 applications, you're applying both bloods. And the Gemara says, Hachinami, here also the same answer we just gave above. Shenisarvu Arba ba'Arba. What happened is you had exactly 4 measures mixed with exactly 4 measures, and so therefore you'll apply both of the 4 measures, and that's how the obligation will be fulfilled. And the Gemara continues, the Mishnah goes on to say, Matan Arba b'Matana Achas. Let's say you have blood that's supposed to be applied to 4 sides of the Mizbeach, and it gets mixed with blood of 1 application, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Aleph.